if you don't know when you're going to get close to done, then you feel like it's never going to end. If you can give yourself opportunities, if you can plan projects out, it kind of gives you those markers to know it's not forever. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I get to celebrate and give myself a vacation in 6 months, or, whatever that is that you need to do for yourself so that you don't feel that burnout.
Hey hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey, and welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. This is episode number 46. So have you ever felt stuck in your motion design career, or maybe you feel overwhelmed and you're not sure what to concentrate on next? Everybody keeps telling you to do all of the things like posting daily posts on Instagram, redoing your reel, or branding as a studio. And you feel like the list is just getting longer and longer, and you don't know what to tackle first or how to get rid of the overwhelming feelings. Well, today I wanted to bring on Jess Peterson and Christopher Bernal to talk to you about what to do when you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed. Jess and Christopher are mentors for our Mograph Mastermind Program, which is open for applications now if you're listening to this at the time of release. And if you're listening to it afterwards, you can just head over to the URL as well and sign up for our waiting list. You can go to motionhatch.com/mastermind. So let's get into this chat with Jess and Christopher. So on this episode, I wanted to discuss some different perspectives on getting rid of overwhelm and also moving to the next stage of your career. So whether that's starting to build your own studio or going freelance. And today I have Jess Peterson and Christopher Bernal here with me. So this is actually Jess's second time on the podcast. She was also on episode 16. So if you want to, you can go back to listen to that as well. And you're the first ever guest to make a second appearance. How do you feel about that?
That is quite an honor. Thank you. It's good to be back.
So do you want to both just introduce yourselves briefly?
Yeah, I am happy to start. As Hayley mentioned, my name is Jess. I run a studio called Mighty Oak. We specialize in handmade animation and design, and have crafted campaigns for clients like Netflix, HBO, Airbnb, NBC, Nick Jr., The New York Times. Actually, since I was on your podcast last, we were just named one of Fast Company's most creative businesses of 2019. So that's my new exciting tagline that I get to add to my intros.
That's good.
Yeah. So we've been in business now for about 4 years. So I've had a chance to learn quite a bit about the business side of things along the way, including getting an MBA last year to help me understand how to match creativity with business. I think actually on our podcast, we talked about that. I think I was just thinking about starting classes, and now I'm done. I've been able to take what I've learned and actually was able to join Hayley co-mentoring the last mastermind session, which was really exciting for me. I liked being able to offer what I've learned along the way and also get to learn from everyone else from the class. So really excited to talk with everyone more today.
Awesome. Yeah. So Christopher, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Christopher Bernal. I'm a Bay Area motion designer. The past 10 years, I've been working in internal production companies, agencies, production studios, and most recently down in Cupertino. The mastermind had been on my radar as I was trying to figure out how to take this local Bay Area events group that I've been running for the past 5 years to the next stage. So I was excited when the opportunity came up to join Hayley and Jess in the next session of the mastermind as a mentor.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm really excited to have you both part of the next session to be mentors. It's going to be really good. So we'll tell everyone more.
I was going to say, Christopher, Hayley and I had a chat like at some point, like halfway through the session, we're saying like, Christopher's really good. He should probably be a mentor. So we talked about you very early on. You were already very promising.
Oh, that's fantastic. I probably went a little bit overboard, but the weekly accountability and just getting an opportunity to be really focused on a personal project, that was a really exciting thing because it tends to be something I'd done alone. So getting a chance to work with you more closely over the next several months is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. And it's really, really cool to have both of you on board, I think, because then we can kind of help serve people in different ways, because I feel like you both have quite different backgrounds, Jess coming from more the building a studio side of things, and you've obviously been freelancing and doing a lot of in-house at agencies and things like that. So I think it's really, really cool. So I wanted to talk a bit about like some of the stuff, I guess, that we talk about in the mastermind with people and just kind of give people a bit of help, just a bit of help and advice on the podcast, and sort of see if we can help with these kind of feelings of when you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do next, because I feel like that's happening quite a lot. And what I see is like different stages of people's career, I think. I wanted to kind of go through a few of those things. So as motion designers, I think that we end up getting caught up with many things and feeling like we have to do everything. Like we're like, oh my God, I need to post on Instagram, I need to post on LinkedIn, I need to do my new reel, I need to change my website and all of these things. And it's sometimes really hard to know what to move forward with. Like, what is the thing that you should concentrate on in your business and like those kind of things. So I just wondered if either of you had any tactics when you're feeling like a bit overwhelmed and you're like, well, I don't really know like where to move next. Like, what is the next move in my business or career? And whether you guys had any tips for people about that.
Absolutely. I think, and I still struggle with this. I think we all do, especially when you're a creative and you're hungry for work. There's so many opportunities to be pulled in different directions. Like everything seems like a top priority at a certain point in time. And I think actually our producers really helped me as I tend to spit ideas out like, oh, we should try this and this, to say, but why? Why are we doing this? And we have, as part of a company retreat every year, we come together and talk about the 3 or 4 goals that we're going to tackle each year and why we think that's successful. So I think writing down your bigger goals, it feels a little challenging to do. Writing it down and really figuring out why this is an important goal to you really helps start the conversation, because then when you can find yourself going down a rabbit hole, you can look back to that goal and say, is this actually helping this goal? And then we either need to maybe revise the goal if we feel like, yes, this is really important, or maybe it's something we put in what they call the parking lot for another time. Come back to it. It's not that it's not something we'll tackle, but again, thinking about the why we approach certain tasks, I think is really important to keep us focused and from burning out trying to do all the things.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I like the idea of like, thinking about like the big goals and the future kind of stuff, but then trying to break those down into like more quarterly goals and then monthly goals and then weekly goals. And I feel like we've kind of brought this sort of stuff up on the podcast a lot before, because I feel like it's very important and people just seem to, I think it's about prioritizing as well. Like, I don't think that people are very good in general, me included, at prioritizing like what should be the next thing. And a lot of exercises that I've been doing and like helping other people with recently is like trying to prioritize, but then like work out, take the things that you want to do and that kind of numbering them in order and then pulling them into kind of what is going to make the most money, what's going to help your clients the most, and kind of having these different categories and different little exercises to help pull you through some of these processes.
On that topic of prioritizing, the things that help me deal with that overwhelm and trying to see so many different things is trying to put things into kind of categories of what are passive things, what are proactive ones, shooting emails, trying to set up meetings and talk to people. Those tend to be things that for me are the most immediate in terms of getting the feedback, and also kind of getting a reality check on when I start to do these things, are they going to be interconnected? Are they going to help set off a chain of things that I can kind of see a path going forward? Because every once in a while, like there'll be lots of really interesting things coming up on my radar, but it's not really an opportunity if it's just a distraction. Yeah, that to me had been the biggest part of just trying to figure out like, what can I do right now? And then how can I move that forward? It can be a little overwhelming when there's just nothing but possibilities.
Right. And it's like that thing where, the shiny object, like when you get into doing something, I think, in your business and you're like, okay, well, now I've like worked out that I'm going to post once a week on Instagram or something like that, let's say. And then you're like, oh my God, there's like a new social media, or like, oh, maybe I should do this on LinkedIn as well. Should I be doing this on LinkedIn? Or are the people doing this on LinkedIn? And are they getting clients doing that? Like, I feel like it's so easy to get distracted and not be like, what is actually working? What is bringing the money in? And those kind of things, like trying to concentrate on making sure that you're having questions to ask yourself, I think are really, really important. And people don't seem to do that enough.
Right. I think when time allows, being able to give yourself time to reflect as well. I mean, it's really tricky to take time, especially when you are the one making and trying to think about, you're doing strategy, you're making it, and then trying to take time to think about how it went. Like, that's a lot to ask for. But if you can give yourself a little bit of time to process, maybe not every project, but maybe like we do a quarterly, it's called quarterly postmortem. We talk about as a team, what went right? What could we fix for the future? Did we follow the tips that we had made for ourselves from the last time? And again, it starts to help us navigate our priorities. Like we were trying to reach this goal to be more efficient. Did we tackle these tasks in the right way? This seems to be an area that keeps getting us in the weeds. Let's just scrap it. Like, let's not offer the client this next time. It's not getting us anywhere, And so I think taking that time to reflect is also really helpful, almost as much as setting the priorities. It's constantly going back and going, and how are we doing? And does that make sense? Because you will find that sometimes you have to pivot and readjust. So I think it's important to do both forward and past thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And you said you did that with your team. I like that you call it a post-mortem. That's really funny.
It sounds really dark, doesn't it? I don't know where it comes from, but that's
yeah, like I've done a similar thing, but we called it a retro, like a retrospective.
That's sweeter. That's a little sweeter. No. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, well, both is fine. But yeah, like a similar thing. But then you can do like a retro with your client as well, right? Like you could ask them like, hey, like, how did this go for you? What did you think that we did well? What did you think that we didn't do so well? And that kind of thing. What can we do better for you next time to help you get the animation that you want or whatever? Those kind of things I think are really important to get feedback to.
That was something that was kind of running through my head, is that the things I like are more immediate. They don't require a lot of follow through, but sort of when you identify that thing that's going to require a commitment and follow up and follow through and iterating on it, I'm right there with you. Like looking at how past projects have gone, how to make those move forward. And even just the things that I'm doing day to day. If I don't have any kind of like metric to gauge it, is this improving? Is this getting better? You're just spinning your wheels.
I was just thinking about, because we were talking about, like how do we figure out what to work on? How do we figure out what are the important things to do, the important projects and tasks and stuff like that? Is there a time where maybe it's best to delegate some of these tasks? Because what people tend to do, they're like, okay, well, like if I get too much freelance work, I'll hire another freelancer. But then I'm not sure that they really think about like bookkeeping assistants or someone to help do social media stuff and things like that. I don't know what your experiences are on that kind of front.
For me, it really depends on the context. Is it my freelancing business? Is it when I'm working in a context of a team? Delegating is something I had to learn the hard way several times, especially when I was working primarily on site at different companies. Making that move to realize that your time is better spent in different areas, letting go of certain things and sort of the autonomy of it. It is definitely a process of learning how to even prepare and to ask for help. As I began to learn that in a production context of being able to work with interns, freelancers, being able to rely on a producer to take notes during a meeting, like help me figure out the schedule so that I could focus on maybe the technical or the creative, partnering with people became super important. And for my freelancing, I don't necessarily need to delegate the bookkeeping or the project scheduling, but I have a tax advisor. I have a financial planner. There's several people that I work with in terms of peers. When I run into a issue on a project file, there's usually go-to folks where I can send them files so that I can keep on moving something forward and they can get back to me to help out. So sometimes it's not even just delegating, it's just being able to partner and being able to take some of that stuff off your plate and not know that, oh, I need to go down this rabbit hole to figure out everything related to this struggle. And even extending that out, like the meetup and personal projects, those are definitely other areas that became more and more apparent I needed help.
Yeah, I think it's like you're saying about your meetup, because you've been doing it for like a long time before, like on your own, basically. And that was something that you were sort of talking about a lot in the mastermind program, is kind of trying to figure out who to hire, how to get volunteers, and like what do they want to help with and all this kind of stuff. Like not even like hiring other people, I guess.
Christopher, I like that you said partnering is an option too, because I think that is also just as powerful. It's not always delegating. To your point, I mean, for freelancers, the idea of delegating to someone else is not always an option, but bringing on extra help, I mean, whether it's actual execution or, I mean, the mastermind, I think, was just being able to bounce ideas off of someone. I've found to be really effective for people. That's partnership in its own way too. Because I think it's important for people, I know, in thinking about my own struggles, probably similar to Christopher, when you feel like you can do all the things and you try to do all the things. And we think that's the most cost efficient way. I think I thought that for years when we started the business. The most cost efficient way to do everything is just if I do it. But I think, and Haley's heard me say this, I feel like a broken record about your natural strengths, but like figuring out what you're really naturally good at. I think if you're really able to sit down and process not just what you like to do, but also what you're naturally just doing seamlessly and easily, if you can take the other parts that are on your plate and maybe invest in someone that is also naturally good at that to help you, you find that the work goes so much quicker and that it actually is it's more cost efficient. It's actually more successful. It allows you to be a better creative or a better small business owner or whatever the work is. And I have found that to be true time and time again. Every time we make a new hire, I hold my breath and go, oh God, is this the right decision? Maybe we can just keep working a little harder ourselves. But you find they're bringing a strength to the room that's making us better. It is an investment, I think, in the beginning, because there's a lot of communication that has to happen to make sure that your goals are clearly executed on and, that everyone's has a say and their voices are heard and that you're getting to the right outcome. But I think when you can delegate to the right partners, I think partners is a good word. I think it makes the work all the better. But it's a process. Not easy for people who can do it all or want to do it all.
Yeah. And I think my experience of this is like doing a lot of social media stuff and doing a lot for Motion Hatch and things like that is like at some point you realize like your time is worth like a certain amount of money basically, and you try and figure that out. And then if you can like hire people that are cheaper than what you would like. It's almost like you're hiring yourself when you're doing those tasks. You're like using those hours and you're like, say if I could be doing something else that is going to get more clients or the actual animation work, but then I'm spending all this time on my like social media and on my bookkeeping stuff and things like that. Like if you can hire someone else who's cheaper to do that and then you can do the other stuff that brings in more money, to me, that makes sense. It is hard as well. I've literally just the past, I don't know, like say year have like started doing this kind of thing. So I'm totally like not saying that it's easy, but I just think that's maybe one of the ways that people don't utilize to get more help basically in whichever form that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to delegate increases the ability of a team to be able to make more because several individuals can work way more efficiently than a single rock star artist or designer. In animation production, that's why we have leads and we have supervisors and we have directors, and there's this whole hierarchy of creative and management and then sort of roles that sort of bleed in between that. And sort of making that bridge of, that's right, animation is extremely collaborative. And yet when you switch focus to something like business or the intricacies of, just another format of where you're putting your energy, suddenly this connection sort of like breaks and you're like, oh, wait, I got to do all these things. I have to, especially if you're coming from animation, almost everything in animation is very collaborative. And you're always partnering and people have strengths and those like unique talents. And we're used to seeing it in that context and not necessarily, well, it kind of goes beyond just, animation. It goes into scheduling, budgets. It's so many more avenues, not just what you could do individually, but being able to delegate and being able to partner is huge.
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to touch on like another thing as well, because what I've seen a lot in the industry, I think I talk about this a lot because I always just like really struck me when I first started freelancing. People they're like, okay, they go freelance and then they worry about getting work and then they get work. So then they just keep saying yes to all the projects, like yes, over and over again. And then they've got too much work and they overwhelm themselves and they're working like 12-hour days and all the weekends. Like I literally met people, they would come in when I was working full-time, work with me full-time, and then they go home and like do another whole freelance project like after work. And I'm like sometimes maybe you need to do that kind of thing. You have like a season of that where you're like trying to go freelance or something. So you're doing freelance stuff on the side of your full-time job or that kind of thing. But I just don't want people to like think that they sort of like have to do that forever, and like we all want to work hard and we all want to build our own businesses and we want to do great work. But I just wondered if what you thought of that, and like, do you do anything in your businesses that brings a bit more harmony to your life, or is that something that you consider?
It's funny. I mean, this definitely blends between, there's like several things. Like one is there's the fear of missing out. There's scarcity, especially when you're first getting into freelancing.
Yeah.
There's this idea that these are the only projects that are going to be here, and you haven't recognized that things are seasonal. There are busy times of the year. There's different times that your network is going to have different opportunities. Depending on what your proactive and sort of passive ways of getting client leads, those are going to hit at different times. So sometimes you'll hustle for several months, then suddenly everybody wants you because you've been on their radar. Now everybody's projects are coming in and you start to say yes to one. And then you find out about another project which kind of starts to butt against the end date of the project you just agreed to. So you say yes. And then there's a part-time gig, which maybe you can moonlight on because you've really been wanting to work with this other company. And so these opportunities, they can start to snowball or sort of all land at once. And the last thing you want to do is suddenly, oh, well, if I say no, they're never going to call me back.
Yeah.
Or if I don't take this opportunity, I'm not going to have enough cash to be able to be as choosy for my next project. And like, there's this weird sort of like fear of the project's just running out. And then there's also this issue of, well, if you start to say yes to too many projects, you're not going to be able to choose which ones are actually going to be helping to move you forward. It's definitely a struggle. And I wouldn't say that there's ever a resolution to that, because there's always going to be times that you want to say yes to every project, but you also have to think long term. Like, am I going to need a break after I do 3 projects? Or can I do one sort of chill project while I hustle occasionally when the right job comes along?
Right.
And I think that's something where when I'm trying to balance family time, the events that I want to do, occasionally there is a side project where maybe it's a music video or a personal animation project that somebody wanted help on. If I've booked myself so full of just work, then I'm not going to have any opportunity to do any of those things. And so I think that practicing saying no, it really is about, okay, I just have to normalize not everything that pops up is an opportunity. Just because it's all happening at once doesn't mean that it's going away. This is just sort of the beginning of some of those inquiries. And if you've saved up enough, it's not like you're going to run out of money before those next jobs sort of line up. I think there's a lot of like things that you kind of have to shore up, but there has to be, at some point, you have to be able to say no to every project that comes up so that you can pick and choose and sort of curate the jobs, because the year fills up real quick.
I think that's really true. But when you like first start out and say you want to, a lot of times people are like working full time, they want to go freelance. How do you kick it off from there? Do you think it's about like saving some money then too, so you kind of have that backup, so you're not just kind of like jumping into the deep end?
To pivot from animation and visual effects to motion graphics, there was a pretty lean 6 to 8 month transition as I was moving from Maya and Nuke to Cinema 4D and After Effects. The projects that came in were a little scattered, and for every job that I took, that delayed sort of my training and progression into those new applications. That first year of freelancing, it really reinforced that I needed to have at least 3 to 4 months of finances sort of shored up. Now when people ask me about freelancing, immediately you want to talk about creative, how do you get those jobs? But I've sort of been taking a step back and asking them, why do they want to do it? And how long can you save so that when you get into it, it isn't a panic, because you want to have this buffer, and the buffer is going to get used. Because if you're not taking every single job, you're going to see that 3 months of income start to slip away, because a couple weeks off between projects and things come up and projects don't always align or they fall through. And so you have to have that pull of money or you are going to be in that panic.
Just adding to that, and Haley, to your question about starting off, I do think there's also a matter of, I've called it a endurance planning. This is the new term I'm coining at my office. Because, I mean, when we first started our business, it was, I mean, the first couple of years, to be honest, we were working all the time. And I am a bit of a workaholic, so I can really get carried away. But we were so hungry to build the business that I think maybe 2.5 years in, when we finally started having nights and weekends free, I felt so guilty. It really freaked me out because I didn't understand why. I was like, I should be doing something. Why do I have this weekend off? What's wrong? I think it's about working smart, not working hard, but we had put enough plans in place where we had delegated and built the teams and now had people helping so that we could take those weekends off. It wasn't that I wasn't working hard. We had been working smart. We figured out another way. It did take a couple of years to get there. And I think, when I talk to my team now, I will say, I mean, we pride ourselves in being pretty good about coming in on time, leaving on time. We don't do a ton of late nights, big projects. We try to be really thoughtful about bringing in more help when we need to. But, sometimes the right project comes along. It's got a rush turnaround, but you want to do it. Like these things they are what they are. I talked to them, because we're saying, people can really feel the burnout towards the end of a project. And I said, something I'm interested in trying out with the team is, again, endurance planning, something that I used to do when I was running cross country. So I'm bringing sports into this for a second. But when we used to go to a race, the day before, our coach used to take us to the course and walk us through and say, okay, here's the halfway point. Here's when you get to when you're close to the end, here's the finish. And what it was doing was helping create these expectations and like the notes of when you're going to get close to being done. Because I think otherwise, what our coach would tell us is if you don't know when you're going to get close to done, then you feel like it's never going to end. And that's most often when we burn out, when we're like, this is just my life now and I'll never get out. And I think that's when it becomes overwhelming. If you can give yourself opportunities, if you can plan projects out, I'm going to work really hard for the next 6 months because for this goal, it kind of gives you those markers to know it's not forever. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I get to celebrate and give myself a vacation in 6 months, or, whatever that is that you need to do for yourself so that you don't feel that burnout. I don't think it's a matter of just the working hard. I think it's not knowing when that ends or when the success will come. So I think that's also something to consider, to give yourself those markers. I think is sometimes, I use it now. I feel like I should thank my coach from many years ago, because I really do find it to be helpful to say, okay, but this isn't forever. Like we got to get to this step. I'll take a break and then move on to the next step.
I think that I came in the mastermind program, we talked about this tons, about having personal projects and stuff that you do and making time for those things, because those are the things that are going to push you to get more clients that you like working with. Maybe you're like experimenting with a new technique that you want to do, or a new style, or just making your portfolio better. And that's going to get you better clients. But then people are kind of in this like thing where they're like, well, but yeah, I've got clients, but like they might not be the clients I want to do, but then I'm just going to keep going with them because that's what's giving me money right now. And it's like, you don't have to just stop doing everything and just like working on your personal projects, but like what you're saying, like carving out that time for like going on a holiday or a vacation, or carving out a bit of time to do a personal project. Like these are all things that actually in the long run really, really help you in your business and your career and also in your life,
Right. And I actually think, to add to that, I think community gets lost. I think you and I talked on our first podcast. I don't come from the animation world. I was a music kid and long story short, made my way here. But I find animators have to spend so much of their time siloed in work. Like a lot of these feelings, it may just feel like it's just you going through it. And I think having community and people to talk to is also an opportunity to create that harmony. When you take those breaks, you don't always have to take them alone. I'm saying vacations, but maybe it's like lunch with friends or peers and a chance to talk to people. I think that helps the creative process. It makes you feel less isolated. And I would add that to endurance planning. It's like take time to connect with others. I mean, I think that's part of what the mastermind did too. It gives people a chance to connect and just say like, I'm going through this, and someone else either can commiserate or maybe is like, oh, I could use your help on this. And like solutions come out of that too. So I think that's also part of the process, is to know you're not alone and you don't have to be alone through this. The work is fun. It should be fun. Animation's like fun and weird. We should lean into that more as a group.
It's funny when you mentioned coffee breaks. Like based on something you had mentioned earlier, I wanted to talk about opportunity cost, because that definitely plays a part in making time and doing things like with constraints. Right before I started a meetup, it mostly came down because when I got into motion graphics, my network just wasn't full of motion designers. Well, I only knew 2. And so some of my jobs where I was working on site, I saw these amazing people, but everybody was stuck in front of their desk. They were eating at their desk. They were going home as soon as work was over. There was no sort of time where we were able to hang out and chat and discuss all these things. It sort of started with, okay, let's all go grab lunch. And at least that way we can have a conversation. And then it turned into 3:00 coffee breaks every day. The whole animator bullpen would just leave and we'd have coffee. And for that 15, 20 minutes, walking to the coffee shop, getting our coffee and coming back, we had these amazing conversations. Because I had been going to meetups for other interests, the idea really came together quickly, is that sense of community. It really can't happen unless you're very intentional about it. Just because you're working at a place, you can still be very isolated. Even if you're surrounded by other animators, you're on site, you're doing the work, you're kind of just in it. Like it doesn't dawn on you like, oh, these are the people, they're probably having similar struggles. Like what applications are they studying? Are they moonlighting? Do they plan to do this forever? Do they want to supervisors? Do they want to start their own shop? It's funny until you actually make that time. Yeah, it doesn't happen naturally. And it's motion design in particular can be very isolating because the work is so all-encompassing sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one other thing that you sort of making me think about there is you have the online communities and like Twitter and things like that. But then sometimes I think because of the nature of social media, that can get quite negative. You don't always have that like face-to-face kind of thing. Because I do encourage people to like communicate with each other online and on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But I think it's different like in person or on a video call or something like that. Like you can actually see people and you're just having like a regular conversation conversation, like they're in the room with you. It's not like the same as people like moaning on Twitter or whatever. You know, I feel like there's been a lot of moaning on Twitter recently, so that just kind of came into my head, I guess.
I haven't really fully digested what this means, but since I participate in the mastermind, even just being able to do video chats weekly with folks, all of the isolation that I felt, even when you were in a chat room and you have all these people talking and you're hitting on all these topics, it can still feel isolating because there's no engagement. And the meetups was such a great opportunity because I got to meet folks in person. But recently, even if I'm going to go on a call with somebody, I schedule it through video. Even if it's just like a one-on-one, like it's not, oh, let's do emails, it's let's do a video chat. Because even just that, being able to see the other person, have the conversation, or maybe if we're sending too many direct messages back and forth, it's funny that even just video has sort of been able to break down that wall of, you know, hey, we could have this conversation. Why don't we just turn on our webcams and just hash this thing out rather than have this chain of comments, which tone is lost. You know, if somebody's down and you can get a sense of that, you can kind of like raise them back up or sort of answer the questions quicker. There's a lot more that you can read from somebody's face than I look at Twitter, it just gives me anxiety. And even the idea of being on Slack without knowing the people first, it feels really intimidating because it's fancy names, it's profile images, which may or may not be their face. There's half a dozen people having unthreaded conversations on dozens of topics. Like I feel that it's hard to feel like you're part of a community and engage with people if it's in that format.
Yeah. And I think like this is a big thing. It's just come up so much on the podcast before, is like about having a community around you, being involved in the motion design community. Like these are the things that help you in your career, like overall, because then you build connections and like not even, you know, feeling like kind of isolated and lonely side of it. It's all of the like, this is how you can network as well and kind of build more stronger connections, I think, with people rather than just, you know, us all being like, oh, I'm just doing my thing on my own, you know, because I'm freelance and that's what that means. It means that I'm like on my own. And like, especially if you're working remotely, you know, I work on my own in my house, like, but I don't feel like I'm on my own because I'm on calls quite a lot, like on video, and I'm chatting to people all the time, and like we can see each other right now on this podcast. Like probably people are listening so they probably can't see us, but that kind of makes such a difference, I feel.
No, it does. You're totally right about the idea that it's networking. I think sometimes people feel, again, the feeling of guilt, but I have to be working, so I have to be literally in the weeds. I think people, and I can say this being an owner of a small business, people don't realize the power of soft skills and connecting with people to bring in more business. It sounds silly to say, but once you really build your community and really understand the industry and you're really, I mean, it's about making friends. And that sounds like too easy, but it is. The whole, like, it's not what you know, who you know. I mean, obviously it's got to be a healthy balance of the two, but who you know in an authentic way, I will add, is incredibly valuable to growing business. You shouldn't have to be sending out cold emails. We talked about that on the mastermind quite a bit. I don't believe in heavy cold email success. I think reaching out to warm leads, someone that knows someone through someone. I mean, it's like we go to restaurants because someone recommends us, you know, recommends the restaurant, right? It's the same thing in work. People are excited to meet with someone who comes with a recommendation, who comes through a trusted source. And I think we really would all do ourselves a good favor to lean into that. And again, building a community is good for not just your own mental health, but also your financial health.
Yeah, and I think this whole thing about like being a mastermind and having accountability and stuff like that as well, like it comes with a heavy kind of thing of you're there to kind of get help, obviously, and to have that community yourself, but there's also the other people, you know, and it's like having the mindset of I want to help other people too. Like even if you're just starting out, I feel like you still have stuff that you can give, you know, other people, even if they might be a bit more further along than you, because maybe they've kind of lost a bit more of that early kind of feeling or something like that, or like there's always like someone who's like a couple of steps behind you as well. And I just think like that is ultimately what I feel like has changed my career, is just having that mindset of abundance and that I want to help other people too. And I just thought that was like an important thing to add. I feel like people are always like, oh, I don't like networking because I feel like I'm like trying to like sell someone something and all this stuff. But I always think, okay, if I go to a networking event, how can I like help the other people there? Like I feel like you get much more out of it if you have that mindset.
Absolutely.
100%.
And creatives need to feel more comfortable saying, I am selling something. I don't know. Otherwise, it's a hobby. So yes, you're selling your services, but it helps people. It helps other people who are selling. So it's both. I think we all need to empower ourselves to feel okay, because also that will come into play when you're starting to charge too, right? You shouldn't feel sorry for offering your services to someone who needs it. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly. But I just think like when there's that like to clients, for sure, like people who need your services, they are out there and they do need your services and they do need you and they do need to know about you. So you need to market yourself and all of these things. But at the general motion design community as well, they need you to be talking to them because they're isolated and they're lonely and they're like got late paying clients and they don't know what they're doing either. Do you know what I mean? Like there's different ways that you can help different people. That's what I try and think about when I think about what business that you care about and that you feel confident selling and doing all of that stuff is about, you know?
Coming across as authentic is something I can't emphasize enough. And it's funny, even just, we tried a little bit, instead of referring to it as networking, we were having a mixer or something, just so that people didn't immediately put on this, okay, I need to be a hard sell, I need to present myself in a certain way. The 180-degree turn that I took with motion graphics was that I started a meetup about 6 months after switching to that career. For some folks that were showing up, it was their first time using Cinema 4D. They were coming from other industries or graphic designers that wanted to do motion. And I think that being able to help has just been such a huge part of me getting into motion graphics. And even the reason why I pivoted into it is that you can talk to any motion designer about what tools they're using, strategy, work. And I feel like, especially in some of the online circles that I do dabble in, and just the general sense that I've gotten from the Bay Area, is that motion designers are very giving in terms of project referrals, skills. Like everybody's sort of raising themselves up because it's a relatively new form and the technology is changing so rapidly. There isn't really like a definitive guide to being a motion designer, which is why like referrals are so crucial, because when you say you're motion designer, well, what does that mean? Are you UX? Are you visual effects? Are you animation? And because everybody's coming at it from so many different places, you could be an expert in one field, but then not, and then just a slightly different use of the same tools. That's a massive just shift in thinking, is that you have this opportunity, really at any level that you're at, to have interesting conversations and sort of give insights and just share, and just making that part of your, yes, it's business and it's networking, but that's also a huge part of just becoming good. And, especially if you want to be freelance, being able to have those soft skills, talking to people about your work. And even sort of, if somebody says they don't know what you do, you've had all this practice talking to people that are maybe slightly outside of animation or just getting started. And that really helps you just present yourself in a professional way, but, also a friendly way.
Yeah, and I feel like, like you started the meetup sort of like quite early on, like you were saying, like 6 months or something. Or is that like after you went freelance or you moved into motion design?
Yeah, it was when I pivoted into motion design. I found visual effects and animation to be very isolating in post-production, whereas motion graphics, you were working on-site at agencies, you were bouncing around. Previously, I just kind of hang out at a shop. You kind of have like specific clients that you worked with, whereas I kind of saw this like wide open world of whatever motion design. Motion design was what I thought it could be. It could be editorial, it could be UX. I just saw it sort of blue sky. Yeah, so I made part of that career pivot. I wanted to be tied to a community this time, not forums that, sometimes your question would go unanswered for months. There were Slack groups. There was LinkedIn, like even meetup.com. Like there were so many avenues to just meet people that do what I wanted to do, that it just seemed kind of silly to not just jump into it as soon as I could, before I was 100% comfortable with the tools or really had this next chapter of my freelancing dialed in. Being a traveling designer, working on site, direct to client, like all these different, things that I was interested in pursuing were just going to get enhanced if I just started to iterate in public, but literally the public with real people, not just, oh, I'm going to post a bunch of stuff on Instagram or populate my Behance or make a blog, just having conversations. Anytime I had a struggle, I just make an event to talk it through. In Slack, you just post a question and people start to have a conversation, just macro that out, have a dinner with some motion designers, bring your struggles. And it's amazing how quickly you can get yourself unblocked just through some coffee or a lunch or a dinner with some other, with your peers.
Yeah, I think that's like just a great message like for people. I just think, getting more in the real world and just trying to take some of those relationships that you made online maybe a bit more offline and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to ask you both as we finish up here, what kind of things you think the audience can take away from this episode?
I have an immediate takeaway that I think I've wanted to mention. Like a lot of the thoughts that have been popping into my head, and also even before we started the call, is that talk to the people who do what you want to do. That's the quickest way to work out, is that going to be a good fit, especially when you're getting into something new and you're not sure about all of the nuances. Talking to subject matter experts, or in this case, doing the job that you want to do, you get real feedback, you get real life situations that they've gone through. Depending on how well you know them, even if it's been a referral, you can have feedback that's sort of tailored to your particular situation. When I was interested in becoming a creative director, I got introductions to creative directors. When I had wanted to make a career pivot to being a producer, I talked to producers and they very quickly shut down that dream. Just because of the reality of the landscape at that time.
Yeah.
It was not going to work. But that to me had just been this reoccurring theme in my own career, is that it's so natural just to isolate yourself, but to push yourself and have a real conversation, not leave things to be such a mystery, or at least just to iterate on things with other people. You get new perspectives, you get just a better sense. You get clarity even just hearing yourself speak out loud sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. Just that feedback from others, especially in like we're saying in real life on a call, having a coffee, that kind of thing.
Clearly what we've talked about is there's a lot of different steps to help avoid burnout and keep you on track. And it's goal setting and endurance planning. I'm going to trademark this term. But it really comes down to, and oftentimes the most effective way to do it is having a sounding board. So not to feel too pluggy about the mastermind class, but that is an option to help people get there, is that you've got people who hold you accountable for those goals. They can probe and ask you why you're making certain decisions and what they can do to help you and what you can do to help them. And I think that's kind of at the heart of what we've been talking about today. It's the logistics side, but then you need support along the way. No one does it alone.
I think that's great. Yeah, that's so true. And that's why I feel so grateful to have you guys as well. Just because, I don't want to go alone either. So,
so we won't.
Yeah. So do you want to tell the audience where they can find you both and how to get in touch?
I am on all things at Mighty Oak Grows. So you can find me there, Instagram especially.
So it's still very much a work in progress, but we have a new website that's being created for the meetups that I've been organizing, but also moving forward designing or sort of curating motion design events. It's going to be called Designers of Motion, and the website is coming soon, but we'll have a website link that'll take you to our newsletter so you can hear about how that project evolves.
Great. Thanks. Thanks so much. This was a really fun conversation. So all the things you heard us talk about today are tools to help you get unstuck in your career. And one of the tools you can use is being part of a mastermind group. So if you'd like to join our mastermind program, you can apply now at motionhatch.com/mastermind. If you're listening to this later than the release date, you can head to that link and sign up for the waitlist for our next session. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you. See ya.